Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Fred Garman with Leader Labs, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Fred Talks and Guest. And I'm having with me tonight Dr. Fred Toke, and Dr. Toke is already in the future, 12 hours ahead, because he's in the beautiful country of Singapore. You were to drill a hole from Cleveland, Tennessee, through the center of the earth. You know, they used to say you would come out in China, but I've been there. You'd come out in Fred Toke's living room. So that's where Dr. Fred Toke is. And I just want to welcome each and every one of you to this guest room tonight. What an experience we're going to have as Dr. Fred Toke talks to us. Well, this is a new venture for us, and I just want to thank you for joining in with us on these Fred Talks, and to just be able to bring to you different prominent faith-based and nonprofit leaders from around the world, and to be able to do some Fred Talks to scratch my itch, if you will. And for me, it's just an exciting thing to be able to bring someone like Dr. Fred Toke on, because Fred Toke and I have been kind of attached to the hip for more than a decade. We worked together, first of all, in Southeast Asia. He was on the board of directors with People for Care and Learning, been in his home in Singapore, and he has treated me fine every time that I've ever been in Southeast Asia. No matter what country it was, he has been a true friend and a true helper to me. In fact, we've done so much training together that people kind of get us confused sometimes. So they started giving certain adjectives to us, the good-looking one or the smart one. And I'll let you decide which adjective you want to give to either one of us. Not sure I'd get either one of those adjectives, but we'll see. So thanks for being with us tonight. I pray that you will get the word out about this new initiative, new episode released every Sunday night, Fred Talk and Guest. It's really about a discourse community of people that are curious about all things leadership. And evidently you are, or you wouldn't be with us tonight. So we have with us in the guest room tonight, my good friend, Dr. Fred Toke. And so Dr. Fred Toke is a certified doctor with his doctor in psychology degree with an emphasis in clinical work. But his work is extremely popular with the Singaporean government, for whom he had trained many professionals from diverse backgrounds, a lot of them coming from Hindu and Buddhist backgrounds. But Fred has served the Church of God as a local pastor there in Singapore, and as actually the national overseer of Singapore. Dr. Toke has been a TEDx conference speaker, Asia Pacific Brands awardee, and a nominee for the Singaporean Spirit of Enterprise Award. Wow. Fred is currently the Chief Operating Officer for People for Care and Learning. He works with Pastor Travis Johnson and People for Care and Learning, my old organization. So he stays up with that and continues to work there in Southeast Asia. He comes to the United States quite a bit. So at the conclusion of tonight, he's going to be talking to you about how you can get in touch with him, possibly have him as a guest speaker in one of your events or services. So Dr. Toke, buddy, it is sure good to have you with us tonight in the guest room. Greet the folks, if you will, and then I'll announce your topic, and I'll get you started with a couple questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Garman, for having me. I am the other Fred, maybe the smarter one. Definitely not the taller one. Yep.
Well, we would be safe with that, wouldn't we?
Yep. Thank you for having me, and I really enjoy coming in and to have this chat with you. I always enjoy spending time with you. You know, it's always very stimulating having conversation with you.
Thank you, Dr. Tope. Well, we're still really coming out of, in a global perspective, this COVID-19 crisis, and I'm sure that it has impacted your area of the world as well. As right now I'm still sheltering at home during this pandemic. There's been a lot of anxiety globally, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so tonight your subject is beating anxiety at its game. Man, I can't wait to hear. I'm going to ask you to address really two questions and unpack it for me, if you will. How does anxiety actually work that causes so much of this havoc in our lives? It can really play havoc on us. So how does that work? And then number two, what's the most effective way for us to fight this anxiety? How can we beat it at its game?
Well, according to World Health Organization, 1 in 13 people are suffering from some kind of anxiety disorders. And in US alone, there are 40 million people suffering from anxiety. I think with the COVID-19 situation, there will be more who will be feeling anxious about what's going to happen to their jobs, their lives, their livelihood, and all that. Basically, anxiety is the crisis of your imagination. What you imagine to be true, then you will react to it. For instance, if you have imagined the worst case scenario in your life, there is perhaps coming in the near future, because you already imagine it, your mind is telling that it's already happening, and therefore your body will react according to what your mind tells you. So if the more imaginative one is, the greater the crisis the person will face. For instance, your body doesn't know what's going on. It's your mind that just imagine that tells the body how to respond to what's going on. So if you think of something, for instance, you imagine you will hate it, even afraid of cockroach, you don't like cockroaches, just imagine a cockroach flying in your face, your body will just react and you will grimace a little bit, you know. And it's imagination, just because your body is stupid. It's your mind that tells your body how to respond. And so if your mind says there's a threat, your body will react. You know, your heart will palpitate and things like that. So it's really imagining the worst in the future, and then assuming that it is already happening now. So it's like a trick into, you know, reacting your body, tricking your body to react as though it is already happening now. So you have sleepless nights, and you are not at your optimal best, and your mind, according to the Greek word for anxiety in the Bible is marimnao. It means split mind. So your mind is split into two. We call this the ROI versus the ROP. Now, ROI is not your return of investment. ROI is your reality of your imagination fighting the reality of the present. So your mind is split into what you're imagining and what is really happening now. So according to the percentage that you give to either one of them, then that's your reaction. For instance, you would have spent time having dinner with family members who were physically there, but emotionally, mentally, they're not there. They're just staring at you, but they are not hearing a word that you are saying to them. That's because the mind is split into the imagination. The imagination is so powerful that it becomes a reality to them. That's so much so that what is real before them is like just something that is just glassy, it's just vague, it's not real anymore.
Right.
So this can lead to things like hallucination, delusionment, because hallucination is basically your imagination. Whatever that you imagine to be true, it is true. So you imagine someone is talking to you that is not physically present, that you imagine that the person is really there, and then you begin to talk to the person. That means you have given 100% of your thinking to ROI, and there's 0% to ROP. Your reality of the present is no longer there. Therefore, they lost touch with reality, and it's creating a lot of havoc in someone who is imagining all that. So they become forgetful, and children who are anxious about taking the exam, their mind would be so out of sync with reality that they could not, they understand the question, but they just could not put the answer to those questions because it's just creating that havoc in their mind. So we can beat anxiety at its game by reimagining what we are imagining. So we can tell our brain to shut up.
I've needed to do that on occasion.
Yeah, well, if you feel a little lighter on your head tonight, Dr. Fred, that's because I took your brain out.
Okay. There it is. Shirley's been looking for it.
Yeah, I took it out while you were sleeping. I took it out, and I used this for demonstration today. And this is weigh 3.5 pounds. And this work based on the past. What happened yesterday is hardwired, and so it will then trigger, it will become your filter for today. Well, according to the laboratory of neuroimaging, every day we release about 70,000 thoughts, and 90% of those thoughts that we generate every day are based on the past. So the more negative past you have, so the more negative future you will, or the negative present you will produce, So your brain is hardwired, and then every situation that you are stimulated, it will release algorithms like the computer. Mm. You see someone, you produce an algorithm, this guy is a threat to you, don't go near, and someone asks you to do them a favor, don't do it because he was going to cheat you and all that. So it produces all these algorithms. So the more negative past you have, the more negative algorithm it will automatically release. So anxious people tend to have negative past, and then the algorithms that they release become the reality, and therefore, they would then be nervous, their heart will be palpitating and all that. Only 10% of your thoughts for the day, of the 70,000 thoughts that have been released, are of the present and of the future. So the person will have no transformation if there's no renewal of this thing here. They can receive Jesus, but if they don't renew their mind, rethink the process, have a paradigm shift, the old self will always remain, because you will always be triggering the past filter for what's current and what's future. So we have to look at this beating anxiety as game, to look at this thing as a dualistic perspective. This is your hardwired brain. Your thinking is your software. So does your hardwired brain tells you how to think, or does your thinking tells your hardwired brain how to think? So we actually have to come out of ourselves and tell the brain, this is my past, I'm going to do something, this is not real, it hasn't happened yet. So you have to talk to this little hardwired thing to shut up, and and then you rewire the thoughts by your thinking, the rethinking process here. So the more negative experience you have, the more you have actually inputted into this hardwired thing here. So if I'm going to show you this, when I show this brain, you will never know whether if this brain belongs to a Black African American or a white American or a Chinese, because we all look the same from the inside. So it's just like when you're buying a new laptop, it's all the same. But what software you put in differs one from another. So cultural background, cultural system will also have that input into this. And the brain that we have is all the same. It's the software. And so the more negative virus you put into it, the more viral it will become. Every time you think of something, the virus will appear, and that causes all this havoc in our thinking and our thought process. And that's why anxiety, if we don't control it, we don't reimagine it, we don't tell the brain to shut up, it will just destroy our lives, and it will impede us from making good decisions.
That is a powerful thought, to think about the outside of the computer, if you will, the casing, but remove the casing, remove the skin color, remove what's on the outside, and we're all the same on the inside. It's just
You
it's
could
just
tell,
what's been programmed on the inside.
right?
That is so powerful. Well, golly, I guess you got good news for us because you're going to tell us what's the most effective way to beat this thing. And we're all the same on the inside. So what's the good news?
Well, I think we have hope. You know, I have we all have hope in changing this. I think this, though it may be hardwired, it can be rewired. What is learned can be unlearned and then relearn. But the first step towards all this is to be aware. There's to be mindful about what our natural tendency would then cause us to react. For instance, if we have the tendency to immediately be reactive and not responding to situation, then we have to stop and tell ourselves, hey, wait, before I react, I need to, you know, assess this first. And you know, and look at it from an analytical perspective. So I have this strategy called APPLE, APPLE. So an apple a day will stop you from seeing professional like me. So
hey, I'm all ears, buddy. Give it to me.
So you got to get out of yourself, you know, and look into and talk to your brain. And that's, you got to be very conscious of this. To rewire a brain, you got to be very conscious, because the result of consciousness will be conscientiousness. So when you are able to act conscientiously, that means you're aware of the environment, you're able to control your impulses, you're able to control your reactions and all that. So firstly, you got to be conscious, right? A is to acknowledge what's going on within yourself, right? Be conscious about what's going on. Acknowledge, okay, I'm feeling nervous. I'm going to a frenzy, you know, then, you know, acknowledge it, don't deny it, you know, and deal with it. If you can, acknowledge it by writing it down or typing it down. For some of us who use devices, write it down, because remember, it's the power of the imagination that causes the anxiety. It's the crisis of your imagination. So when you write it down, and then when you put it on pen and paper, into paper, then you can read it. Once you can read it, you can intellectualize what's going on inside, rather than it becomes subjective, it is imaginative. So write it down. This is how I feel. First column, what am I, you know, what else can I do? Is this real? And then write it down and read it and try to process it. The first P is to be present. Right? You acknowledge how you feel and be present, have the presence of mind. Be aware of your environment, where you are, who you are with, you know, things like that, rather than let your imagination goes into a sphere where it is there somewhere, but you just cannot capture it. The Bible says you got to put your thoughts under captive to the obedience of Christ. And this is so important, because it's your thought that runs wild that cause all this problem. That's why we have to put it under captive to the obedience of God. And so we got to write it down. The most important thing that I tell my patients is that whatever that you are thinking about, especially when you're suffering from anxiety disorder, write it down. And once you write it down, have the presence of mind of who you are, where you are, you know, and be conscious about it, intellectualize it, write it down, analyze it, you know, and try to process it intelligently.
Right.
The second P is to go into the presence of God, you know, and you know, to pray and pray over what you wrote, rather than it's just juxtaposed of all this imagination is everywhere. It becomes so subjective. Once you put it down on pen and paper, you become more accurate in your prayer. You know what you're dealing with and all that. So go into the presence of God, and then you know how to pray. You know what to pray. You know, I mean, otherwise it's just like, I'm feeling nervous. I do not know what's going on. So put it down on paper, acknowledge how you feel, put it down on paper, have the presence of mind, and then pray, go into the presence of God, and then learn and listen. Learn what's going on and listen, you know, seek advice, seek consultation, listen before you engage, which is the E. Usually we engage first before we do all these other process. So there's a lot. It's easy to do it, but the onus is on the owner of the brain to be disciplined in doing all this. We can
Okay.
facilitate, but the
Uh,
owner of the brain will have to do it.
let me just dive a little deeper into something that's got me interested here. This is awesome stuff. Even though anxiety is caused by kind of a runaway imagination, it doesn't mean that the issue that triggered it is not real, right? Like the COVID-19, that is a real crisis.
Right.
But whether or not, let me use this term if I can, that crisis hijacks me,
Right.
emotionally, or I am able to control my emotions, that's up to me. Am I
Right.
correct?
Right. We can help patients to facilitate that, but at the end of the day, it's the patient or the person who is suffering from this have to learn how to control it, learn to respond to stimulus rather than to react to stimulus. So
Yeah.
the way to respond is to be conscious, and you can respond conscientiously to doing the right thing. It's very important for us to acknowledge it and then be present. That present, the first P is to be present, is to be conscious, is to be mindful. And then that's where you can then tackle it intelligently. You can tackle it, analytically rather than reacting to it emotionally and in a state of chaos.
Well, Dr. Toke, what you're really doing here, I appreciate it so much because it is reinforcing uh, self-development begins with self-awareness, which is one of the key components as to what you were just talking about. And then
Right.
self-awareness will lead you to, once you're aware of it and can write it down and understand the reality of it, then it leads you to self-control, self-management, or self-leadership.
Right.
You have to, and scripture is really, really clear, isn't it? Because that's a fruit of the spirit. We just don't take advantage of it by
Right.
trying to control the mind.
Right. Well, Paul wrote about the mind, more than anything else, and there's a lot of, you know, uh, in the Bible that talks about how we can, put this under subjective to the obedience of Christ and all that. We need to control it, so we need to approach it from a dualistic perspective. The brain, the hardware, and the thinking process are two different things. Once we think it from the monoistic perspective, then this will control us. There's no way we can change this. We can rewire this, by putting in new thoughts and reducing, the past 90% of, the past thoughts, and by learning new stuff, by learning, like in your labs like this, if the audience are here to learn something new, then it increases the 10% of the current of the new thoughts. So they begin that development, then become then it helps with the rewiring. Otherwise, your brain works on the past and it works on automaticity. And therefore, based on those automaticity, it produces algorithms. And if your brain is negative, then it will produce naturally negative algorithms. With negative algorithms, then you will just respond or react, negatively as a result of that. So you got to
You
tell your
have me
brain,
thinking,
hey.
you have me thinking about so many things. My brain wants to go down so many rabbit trails. Uh,
Right.
one of which reminds me, and we've talked about this on occasion when we're together, but the CEO part of the brain and the elephant part of the brain. That
Right.
the elephant is huge, he's powerful, but he's like an elephant in a china shop. He can do a lot of damage really, really quick. But then the CEO part of the brain has the ability to ride that elephant, put reins on that elephant, to be able to control that elephant. And that's what I hear you saying to us. And
Right.
you know, the corporate world is using self-management and self-leadership, going and coming, and teaching people how to be able to use the CEO part of the brain that you've been talking about.
Right.
And then scripture comes along and tells us that there is actually supernatural help. So we need to tap into both sides of this, don't we? And
Yes.
stop being so reactive and stop allowing ourselves. You're telling us the good news is that you're telling us that we don't have to be hijacked by anxiety, that we can beat it at its own game.
Right. We can reimagine ourselves in a position where we are calm and all that. Uh, Pilots, before they go into any flying or any air shows, they go into a green room. I have that experience with that with some pilots because when they do an aerobatic show, they will be in a green room and we will help them to calm their minds down. And so they will imagine, what they will be doing, like at 3 second, this button, 4th second, that button, and all that. So they actually prime their mind to prepare for anything that will come. That means the mind already know what to expect. So they base on that, what is being inputted into the mind. So if, for instance, if there's a malfunction and the plane is heading towards one another, the automatic mind will say, turn right. So if each plane turn right, they will miss each other. And so this is where they go into the green room. They spend about 25 minutes or so just priming their mind, telling the brain what to do. So they control and they beat the anxiety. Because in a crisis, especially for a pilot, you cannot be anxious because that will cause a lot of chaos. And so they have to calm themselves down, to be able to fight that.
Well, Dr. Toke, this has been marvelous. As usual, you have done an exceptional job of unpacking a really hard to understand topic sometimes. But I agree with you. It's time that we take control. It's time that we bring into captivity those thoughts that would hijack us, especially during these times of crises. So I sure do appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your heart. Now, would you just tell the audience here how they might get in touch with you, the kinds of things that they might be interested in having you to do?
So officially, I'm working with I'm serving as a COO of PCL, and then you can go into PCL website to get me, pcl.is. And also I have my own website where I do my own training with leaders and all that. You can go into fredtalks.global. That's my website. And that's where you can find all my materials and the topics that I would normally be speaking on. And so you can email me, fredtalk@me.com if you need to get in touch with me. I have one final thing, if you don't mind, but Dr. Garvin, just to show you the brain, all right? Okay, now this is sliced into half now. Okay, now your brain is, your head is lighter. This is the executive brain, right? This is the executive brain we're talking about, the CEO of the brain. We call this the prefrontal lobe, okay? Now this little fellow here, this white little fellow here, which is about 1,000 times smaller than your CEO, can shut your CEO down. This is called the amygdala. This is your emotional trigger. So you see the equation. This is 1,000 times smaller than your executive brain. But once this is triggered, it shut down your executive brain. So can you imagine the creator, when he created our brain, it meant for this to be tame, then we need to think with our executive brain so that we know how to respond. But we allow emotions to take over. And so when we respond emotionally, this amygdala is being triggered, it shut down your other brain. And so when the emotions rules, rationality is thrown out the window. So
well, the good news that you've told us is that the amygdala or the elephant brain
right.
does not have to be in control.
It doesn't have to.
And that takes time. It's a process, I think. Some of the people that are listening to you tonight might think, but man, the elephant brain, the amygdala, my emotions, they hijack me. They take me, they take me over. But what you're telling us is if we can just write it down, if we can acknowledge it, become aware that of what's happening to us, write it down, that we can learn to be present in the moment and to pray and to get in God's presence and to realize that there is help if we can learn and listen to the resources that are available to us and to good friends and colleagues and professionals. We'll humble ourselves and get that sake. And humility is something we do to ourselves. So we humble ourselves, then there's help for us, that we can begin to pull ourselves out of that cave of depression, that cave of anxiety, that cave of being overwhelmed, and begin to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train.
Yep. Well, David said, I walk through the valley of shadow of death. He did not say, I walk into the valley of shadow of death. There's a lot of difference between into and through. So, like Winston Churchill said, if you walk into hell, keep walking, don't stop.
That's a good note for us to end on. Dr. Toke, thank you so much for being with us. Next Sunday night, I will be releasing, of course, another Fred Talk, and I pray that our audience will join and look for that Fred Talk. And remember, they're on demand, so at your own discretion, you can take a look at this. If you know of someone that missed Dr. Toke's talk tonight as our guest in the guest room, you can go to our website and you can go and watch this YouTube video at your own discretion. You can point them to it. So Dr. Toke, thank you again for joining us from Singapore, for staying up a little late tonight to hang out with us. And I'm glad that I can now know that it's okay, at least 12 hours into the future, everything is going to be all right.
Right, yes, yes. Thank you for having me, Dr. Fred.
Thank you, my brother. I love you very much, and it's always an honor to be with you. You have helped us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me once again.
God bless.
God bless.